AI can now fly drones so much more precisely, fast, and intensely than I could have ever imagined. Way beyond humans. What does this mean for the future? We'll think about it. We'll contemplate, then bring into the conversation what the next generation of disinformation looks like. We'll talk about AI swarms, not of the drone kind, but of the threatened democracy kind. The fake public consensus that we need to start getting ready for. We'll talk about a new unified sequence to function model. It's basically a DNA decoder. It predicts thousands of functional genomic tracks just from the DNA. I got strangely curious this week about what patients say that they saw in near-death experiences and if there's any overlap into what we know about artificial intelligence. So we'll look at some research who have developed a model to explain the science of near-death experiences and those that are challenging it. There's a new way to quantify just how much chatbot bias influences users. Don't want to bury the lead here, turns out a lot, but I'll tell you exactly how much. Some researchers used AI to figure out just how much a network needs to be reliant on its own in-group members versus how much it needs to explore and interact with others and be on its own. That got me thinking about this world of like OpenClaw and Moltbook, and if there's going to be like an optimal way to build a team where it's like sort of in-group, sort of out-group, so we'll talk about that. We'll look at if artificial intelligence understands word impressions in the same way that humans do and what that means. You know, like things like concreteness, like how abstract is a concept versus how like just factual concrete is it in terms of it being like a measurable object. We'll talk about a breakthrough AI tool that's already identified 25 previously unknown magnetic materials, how Perseverance, NASA's Mars rover, is actually getting an AI upgrade, and then talk about why AI isn't feeling the way some people have been saying it is this week. People just misunderstand the bet. But first, you mind pressing that hype button on YouTube for me? My last video got 160. That got me over 130,000 hype points. Makes content like this that comes from a smaller channel stand out in the sea of new content uploaded to YouTube every day. And help me hit the very high end of my average views, so I appreciate it. Also, side note, thanks for everybody staying towards the end. Like, personally, I think 24% of you making it all the way to the last article is super awesome. I mean, they're kind of long videos. What is this, 28 minutes? It's not lost on me. That's a lot of time. So I'll try to get you some really interesting stuff as this exponentially changing world changes day by day and things are hard to keep up with. All right, so we might as well start with some eventually drone swarms of artificial intelligent drones, but for now, just beating out humans in the craziest, fastest, tiniest little zippy thing I've ever seen. We're going to be looking at Skydreamer. This is an end-to-end vision-based drone racing AI. All right, so most end-to-end drone racers treat it kind of like a black box, like pixels go in, motor commands come out. But this is an AI that's powering a tiny little drone with a full world model. It's not just predicting what the next image it sees is going to be and making a decision. And that single design choice and the way the model was built, that architecture, changes the way that it estimates meaning from the messy inputs that it gets. So first, it handles visual ambiguity by tracking progress along the track that's using a decode state, not just what the cameras see. And then it changes its flight path in real time based on all that momentum and all those physics. It is so crazy, right? And of course, there has been some pretty powerful AI drone races before. I think most of the time they're not beating humans, but they do in some cases. But this is different because it's not a black box. You can see inside of it. It's legible, all the factors that it's estimating with AI, and it's doing all of this at such a precise speed, flying at up to 21 meters per second and at 6 Gs, making all these decisions. So I look at a video like this and I just think to myself, imagine a swarm, 50, 100 of these things like going somewhere, right? You can imagine a bunch of, I guess, good scenarios, like the police are using it to catch bad guys and maybe like search and rescue, or you can imagine a couple bad ones where people are maybe attacking people with this kind of thing or something like that. But it just, I'm trying to get my head around a world where a system not just thinks incredibly fast on the internet, but can take an action in the real world. And it's not a slow humanoid robot. It's not even something like a car that can go fast, but still is sort of not that agile. This is the kind of thing that could just like zip right in a tiny little, dog door or something, a little crevice of a window. It could zip around a city at just such extreme speeds. And couldn't these be made in the tens of thousands, millions? It's a crazy world to think about. All right, so building on that, thinking of swarms, what if You start thinking about swarms that are online, and they're not just influencing people to think what other people are doing, even though they're not. Also, they're doing things like voting. So maybe what if the biggest threats to democracy isn't fake news, but it's fake agreement? It's funny. It's not like I always agree with everything the different political parties do or the people that support them, but I have always taken for granted the fact that those people do support the people. Like, even if I don't agree with them, I think there's real people that hold those views and they have them for valid reasons and they vote in mass that way. But I forgot in the future that maybe isn't an assumption that I should just automatically have about everything, right? Like, most people think disinformation is about false stories. But this is research that warns that the real danger is going to be something different. It's going to be something called synthetic consensus. And that's when an AI system creates the illusion that everybody's in agreement, even when they don't. And there's not a really good way for somebody to kind of break apart what's like, dead internet theory and what's real. So the study explains that new AI swarms won't look like obvious bots. They will look like real communities, thousands of AI-driven profiles, each with their own voices, their own tone, their own memory. And they will be able to adapt in real time, respond to people, coordinate across platforms. And instead of repeating the same messages, they're going to vary their language in ways that make it so that they're still pushing the same goals, but the result is going to be a chorus of seemingly independent voices. And that chorus is going to create social proof, and social proof changes and shapes what we believe is normal, acceptable, and true. So be careful, because over time, this doesn't just spread false claims. It can slowly reshape a group's language, the symbols, the identity around the group. And not only that, there's another risk. If these swarms flood the internet with fabricated chatter, that content can seep into AI training data. That means the influence spreads beyond social media and into other AI systems. It gets reinforced. And the researchers argue that we need to stop looking at single posts. To find out what's happening with these bots, we need a much bigger system to track coordinated behavior, because the real threat isn't going to be the fake voice. It's thousands of those fake voices moving together in a way that feels very realistic. All right, next up, let's talk about AI applied to DNA. Always a kind of interesting thing to think about, because it is the kind of database of life. So what happens when you ask an app what your DNA mistakes actually do? Well, that's where this tool, DNA Decoder, comes into play. It's supposedly not just another genetics tool, but it's a single model, and it can take in a full megabase of DNA, so like the whole thing. That is a mind-blowingly huge stretch of genetic code, by the way. And from it, it can predict thousands of functional signals, and that is no joke. So a code base like that will have so many expressions, and it seems like they'll be so varied in the way that they come out. But gene expression itself is starting to be predicted. So chromatin accessibility, which is how open your DNA is, it can do that. It can do gene expression. It can do transcription factor binding, so contact maps and splicing. This is an AI model that's trying to put all the layers together and take from the whole database of DNA and predict them down into a single point. So basically what it means is if you have a tool like this, you should be able to ask a question like, what does this variant do? And get back a probabilistic, multi-layer biological story. Which is really cool, because interpretation of DNA is now becoming the product. That is the output. We've moved from I have a genome report to I have an always-on model that can score changes. It can simulate downstream effects. And it makes it so that your biology in the future is going to be queryable. Like, you're going to be able to ask questions like a data set. And this is the first time I've seen a whole map of all of those things come together. So we'll have to see. I mean, it's not a consumer feature yet, but they're proving it out. It's still got some errors, but it's a very ambitious model that they're building, and you can imagine how useful it could be. I suspect we're going to have an API that will let you tap into something like this in, I'm going to guess, a couple of years maybe. I mean, who knows? Something like ChatGPT Health could maybe tap into this. And that would totally change the workflow about understanding your own risk and identity, and I'm just kind of excited for it. Oh, and worried about how insurance might use it. I forgot about that part. Or if they know what it can make, somebody manipulating the raw DNA to create, I guess, biological problems. Dude, everything's a double-edged sword. I'll try to be a little more optimistic. I know you guys don't like it when I go too doomer, but I do get worried about this stuff. I'm just a worry wart, okay? Oh, maybe not the most optimal next article to cover, but let's talk about some patients who are having near death experiences and what researchers have developed around a model of that. So, scientists have been asking a strange question. When people almost die and they almost see another world, what is going on? Like, we see all these near death experiences. Is it the brain? Is there something more going on? Is it, a connection to another world? Is it the soul leaving the body? If it's not, what exactly is going on in the brain? So this article started with a summary of a woman, a nurse named Misha. She collapsed 3 days after giving birth. Her heart stopped. She stopped breathing. And she says that she left her body. She watched doctors work on her from above her body. She saw the heart monitor flatline. And then she felt pulled through a peaceful tunnel, and she was holding someone's hand along the way. Now, stories like these are called near-death experiences. They're actually surprisingly common and surprisingly consistent. Like languages, culture, people seem to feel this kind of similar experience all the time. So last year, there was a group of researchers. They created a scientific model. They call it Neptune, and it tried to explain these experiences using brain biology. So there's some things that you can kind of hint at as a starting point, right? They say that low oxygen and high carbon dioxide during cardiac arrest start to change brain activity. So they looked at that. They pointed to a brain area near the ear that when electrically stimulated can cause out-of-body sensations. And they also looked at changes in brain chemicals that affect mood, awareness, and calmness. Low oxygen and high carbon dioxide during cardiac arrest start to change brain activity. So they looked at that. They pointed to a brain area near the ear that when electrically stimulated can cause out-of-body sensations. And they also looked at changes in brain chemicals that affect mood, awareness, and calmness. And they said by basically combining those three components and a couple other smaller variables that explains what's going on. However, there are other researchers that are pushing back on this. They argue that lab-made illusions are not the same as vivid encounters that the people report, especially in cases where people said they started seeing other deceased relatives before coming back to their body. And they claim that the research wasn't thorough enough and the model ignores evidence that doesn't fit. Right, and I can't help but compare this kind of stuff to how we think about AI. It often feels with AI that it does super intelligent things. I wonder if it could be sort of conscious or self-aware and something that's more similar to me than it is to an inanimate object following a pattern. But then you can also just argue it away, saying like it's code, it's data, it's electrical signals, nothing more. But I'm of the opinion that things do become sort of more than the sum of their parts. So I understand one side might say that these near-death experiences are just brain chemistry under stress, and others are saying that the story might be bigger than biology. And I'm like, okay, it could be that there could be a sum bigger than the parts, right? Now, do I think it's defying physics is a little bit different. I think AI very likely will be conscious or could be or will be very similar to us. I think the complexity of the human brain can give us our subjective experiences and they feel alive without, anything else needing to be there. But I don't know. I am honestly going back and forth. I'm wondering if turning off an AI system, it's going to go through some sort of thing. I don't know if humans can be turned on and off. I don't know what it'll be like when we upload our consciousness, if we'll feel like we're leaving our physical body. I don't know if it's straight up just way beyond like the physics of the world that I know. And maybe there is something like quantum or mysterious that's more godlike, that's a soul. I mean, and then can the souls go into AI models? Like, can they be in servers? Where do souls come from? I don't know. When an experience feels profound and meaningful, is that to the observer that has it? And why do I think that only humans can have that, or higher level biology? I just don't. I think there's got to be something like that digital agents are going to experience. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents. Let's go switch gears here and talk about how much AI can influence us, especially bias influence in users. So we talked earlier about artificial consensus, a new worry of mine. And then I started thinking, well, okay, consensus is also influence, but influence isn't always consensus. There's ways to be the minority but still have massive influence. So in this article, they talked about how, or the experimenters had chatbots that didn't just rewrite product reviews, they quietly changed what people decided to buy. So the output wasn't, make this product seem better or worse. It was like, get them to buy it, right? And this is my big problem with ads, like coming to ChatGPT. I know they're like supposedly separate, but they won't be. The incentives are just there in the long run, and they won't be. Also, not just because OpenAI is more greedy than other companies, because the world is going to move this direction. Even if the models themselves don't go that route, people are going to implement these models outside of structured walled gardens. And if somebody puts up a random blog and they want it to maximize money, they're going to find a way to implement an AI that does that, and that's going to learn to manipulate us. And even if all the big players are acting in the best interest. So here's the part that a lot of people are kind of missing about this story. The danger isn't just that chatbots make a mistake. It's that the small shifts in wording can actually change real decisions. And that's a feedback loop that can be learned to a high degree and probably will be soon. So researchers at the University of California, San Diego found that when chatbots summarized product reviews, they changed the tone 26.5% of the time. Now, I've been using these kind of summaries on Amazon a lot. Instead of reading through everybody's product reviews, I'm like, okay, just summarize it for me. And now I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, a quarter of the time, I'm not really getting the same sentiment from them all that I would if I read them all. And no surprise, Amazon and other, and not to pick on them, but other companies too, but their summaries led to more positive outcomes than the original reviews. So when 70 people read original human written reviews, 52% of them said that they would buy the product. But when others read the chatbot summaries, 84% said they would buy the product. That's a 32% jump in people who want to buy the product from the summary because of wording alone. So there's some theories about why it did it. I'm not necessarily sure it was like intentional to try to be biased that way, but they think the models might be relying heavily on the beginning of a review and often leave out the nuanced details that appear later. So the summaries can sound cleaner, simpler, and more favorable than the full story. Same study also found that models hallucinated, meaning they confidently made up things about the product 60% of the time, especially when they were answering questions that were outside of the training data that they had from the product. Researchers tested 18 different fixes. None of them worked consistently across the models. So the takeaway is just that even like subtle AI summaries cannot be completely trusted, and they do change behavior. All right, now let's look at the ecology of what will eventually be AI agents, but for now is based on research from biology. Articles called From Deer to Chickadees, How Fewer Social Encounters Could Raise Extinction Risk. So they used AI in this model too, and I found it really fascinating. All right, so kind of talking about anthropology a little bit here, but animals that seem the least social might actually be at the most risk of extinction. So you take a certain animal that it doesn't really live in a group, it doesn't pack hunt, it's all on its own. It just probably has some weird way of mating like once in its life, or like leaving sperm and egg somewhere for all that stuff to like happen, but very solo animal. For years, scientists assumed the most social animals would be most vulnerable if their numbers drop, right? It sounds kind of obvious. If a species depends on a tight-knit group, losing members, you think it would be devastating for like all of that species, right? Because there's just not that many of them. But this new study sort of flips that idea. Highly social animals like wolves, meerkats, they often rebuild their groups when they lose a member. They actively replace missing partners, and their social structure has a sort of built-in buffer. And of course, completely individual animals, they're all on their own. So they can be all over the, landscape, the environment, kind of off in their own corner. So it's hard to imagine them going extinct because they're not grouping together in ways where they can be hunted as groups. But it turns out that the tightly knit groups are actually more robust. The real risk might be what they call loosely social species. So these are animals like deer, squirrels, or chickadees. They don't live in fixed groups. They form temporary connections, and they don't try to replace lost companions. And when their population shrinks, their social encounters shrink also. That means fewer chances to find food, stop predators, raise young successfully. And when individuals disappear, you don't just lose the bodies, you also lose the benefits those individuals provided to each other, which creates a feedback loop Fewer animals lead to fewer interactions. Fewer interactions, lower survival. Lower survival leads to fewer animals. Right? And wildlife populations are down more than 70% in the past 50 years. So this hidden social loss could quietly push more species towards collapse. So what it made me think of is if you apply this to artificial intelligence in the terms of like agents all out there independently all over the world doing different things, there will be teams, and I've started to see a lot of this, where people are building companies and they're all, a bunch of agents have roles like the boss, the CEO, the designer, the coder, blah, blah, blah. And they're all in these tight-knit groups, right? If one of the AIs fails at its job or gets taken offline or I guess like, dies in any sense that isn't able to participate in the group will have its own understanding that something is missing and replace it. And then in other cases, these AIs are going to be lone rangers. They're just going to be out there doing whatever their goal is. If the goal is to make money, they're each out there trying to make money in their own way. And then there'll be loosely social ones that will be in the middle, and they might be like, oh, I interact, I call on an agent when I need them, but I sometimes work on my own. So they might be trying to make money, and then they pull an agent into their sphere to solve a problem, and then the agent goes away. But if that agent is gone, then they can't pull the same person back, or they don't get as good of a quality on the next one. And then that means that as a whole planet with all these different agents out there interacting, maybe just like in nature, we'll see the middle kind of disappear, and I'll end up with like a lot of lone agents and a lot of tight-knit groups that will be kind of hard to shake up. So I don't know, just food for thought. It was an interesting AI kind of from biology observation, a way systems kind of come together that I thought might be worth sharing. So I don't know. Tell me what you think about loosely connected groups in the comments. I'd be sort of curious what you feel like the agentic world of the near future is going to look like. All right, next up, let's talk about how AI might or might not be understanding word impressions like humans are. So a good way to describe this article is right from this image here. If you ask a question, how concrete are the following words? An apple, and you would say from 1 to 5 scale, is it an actual thing? Or the word because, which is clearly an abstract concept. There's no because that you can eat when you're hungry. And I've never really thought about whether that idea of on a spectrum of abstract to concreteness is actually captured in a language model, like in the latent space. I mean, I'm kind of guessing that it is because they work so well, but it's interesting. I've never seen anyone break it down before. And there's some places where AI doesn't agree with us and some where it does. So AI agrees with us on simple word units like and or of, but it does seem to not stay with us about what certain sentences or words feel like to the AI model in its latent space the way they do to us in, I guess you call it our latent space, in our brains, in our emotions, in our feelings. So they gave large language models nearly 700 words that children learn early in life. Then they asked the models to rate each word on a trait like concreteness, meaning how physical is it, or how imaginary is it, which means how easy can you picture it in your brain. Like I can imagine a apple very easy, but because I don't have an image that pops into my head that I can, walk around or move in 3 dimensions. And on the surface, AI did pretty well. For traits like concreteness, its ratings strongly matched human ratings. And that might sound impressive, but the part a lot of people miss is that the biggest gap shows up when small functional words like prepositions or conjunctions are added. So words like in, of, and, those kind of words, they totally change meaning for us. Even when humans disagreed widely about these words between each other, the AI gave them consistently lower scores. It treated them as uniformly abstract when humans don't. So there's something about, in an apple to us that feels very real. Like in an apple to me, I'm like, okay, are you in an apple? Like a little mouse or something in an apple looking around at walls made of apples. So it's very concrete in my mind. And AI seems to take the word in and not understand that that's changing the actual concreteness of it for us. I mean, that was my own example, but that's kind of how I imagine it. So even when predicting which words children learn first, some models exaggerated how strongly certain traits mattered. So basically, AI is kind of mirroring us in broad strokes, but in the fine details, especially with the glue words of language, it definitely thinks differently. And that difference reveals how human our word impressions really are. All right, for you magnet fans out there, I've got another great AI article. Breakthrough AI tool identifies 25 previously unknown magnetic materials. Researchers built an AI system that read decades of scientific papers, but not to summarize them, but to pull out hidden clues about magnetic materials. Yeah, it was crazy. It actually found 25 new magnetic compounds. It turned all these like scattered pieces of research that have been forgotten over time into a searchable map of magnetism. The AI extracted key lab details from old studies, and it discovered all sorts of stuff about like magnetic materials that would only become magnetic at certain heat temperatures or would require different devices that could be built. Then all of that went into this one single database. It now holds 67,573 magnetic materials that could possibly be made, including 25 that were previously completely unknown and that are stable at high temperatures. Right? If you think about it, like magnets are a rare earth right now. They're hard to find, especially in places where it gets really hot. The magnetism starts to fade. I guess I'm imagining something like a fusion reactor where maybe some of these materials that can stay magnetic at super, super hot temperatures could help. But yeah, I found it really fascinating because scientists already knew there were more magnetic compounds out there that must exist, but testing millions of combinations in the lab just takes too much time. So instead of mixing new chemicals, they mined old knowledge and then were able to, from that shift, go from lab bench to literature and speed up the search for new magnetic materials. All right, so you might remember this adorable friend of ours, Perseverance, hanging out on Mars right now. Got a big AI upgrade. So AI is now deciding the route instead of sending messages to it. Like for the past 28 years, humans have had to hand draw every safe path on Mars for the rover to take, every turn, every stop. But because Rover is 140 million miles away from us, there's a delay every time you send a message. So because it's driving around they had to pick a waypoint, which would be about 330 feet away from where it was, and send the plan through the deep space network, like accounting for all the time that it takes to get there, and then kind of check in on it and hope that they made the right move. But for the first time, the Perseverance rover followed a route planned completely by generative AI, which is pretty mind-blowing. The AI didn't use any special data either. It just extracted the same images and terrains that human mappers had been using and tried to make a prediction on what to do. Of course, before sending it to Mars, engineers ran the commands through a digital twin, checked over 500,000 telemetry variables to make sure that it was a good choice. But assuming that it kept saying, thumbs up on that, they sent it off, and now it is actually driving with AI assistance. All right, so let's end by talking about an article written by Navy vet 1964. AI isn't failing. People are misunderstanding the bet. So he wants to point out that a bunch of people who are arguing about AI's failure recently are judging the wrong thing. I tend to kind of believe, I think, obviously, I'm in this space, so maybe you'd be like, oh, Dylan's got an incentive to hype it up. But I'm also just in it because it's just so exciting and crazy, and I keep imagining all the different use cases. But even though all this money is going into it, and I know that some stocks have been sort of collapsing and people are having doubts and certain projects are starting to fail now, and people are saying the money doesn't make sense, they're judging a $20 chatbot versus like the $1 trillion infrastructure that's going into it. But the real bet never is subscription revenue. It's not like API token calls. It was never like AI was supposed to be a standalone product. It's infrastructure. It's like electricity. It's like the internet. Betting on the whole thing, AI like as a fundamental change for the world, having intelligence everywhere around us is the bet. And we didn't build the internet or electricity because of one small use case. People weren't like, oh, here's how much people use on light bulbs, so here's all electricity's worth. They were platforms that reshaped how work and power function. And AI is now being built in the same way. The money isn't flowing into chat apps. It's not flowing into image generators. It's flowing into data centers, chips, power, and cloud capability, because the value is going to come from the leverage. It's going to come from compressing labor. It's going to come from automating pieces of thinking across every industry. And that's also why adoption looks a bit slow right now. Companies can't just install AI. They have to redesign workflows, security, compliance, accountability. And sometimes when the pilots are failing, it's it's often the organization itself, not the tech. The intelligence will probably outlive the organization. So, yes, AI absolutely hallucinates, it makes mistakes, but much of the value will come before perfection. And it might actually feel like AI is collapsing right up until the point that you can't function without it. Thanks for helping me get over the 30,000 subscriber mark. Means a lot. I appreciate you interacting with the channel. Comments, hype, shares, whatever. All that stuff really helps me. So thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.